Welcome back. I'm Dyer Joswick here from Camp Blodgett, and today we are really going to dive into listening. So sadly, one of the results of hundreds of years of segregation and institutional racism are that we're still living in segregated communities. Often white people live by other white people, and people of color live by other people of color. That makes us really disconnected from each other's realities. Here's what I know. If another human is fearful for their life, if another human is fearful for their child's life, I care about that. Because I care about people, and I care about children, and I know you do too. So this is where it's really about listening. Listening to understand, not listening to dismiss, but really just listening. We need to consider that racism is a form of abuse. It's a form of violence, and violence and abuse have no place in our country. So when someone says, Black Lives Matter, and another person responds with All Lives Matter, it's usually because they aren't really listening, or maybe they haven't had the opportunity to take the time to listen and understand why Black lives really matter right now. I could make a whole other episode on that, but today it's really focused on listening. So I want to tell you a story about me personally and one of the ways that I was awakened to listen. I've lived in my home for 15 years, which is on the southeast side of Grand Rapids. It's in a predominantly Black neighborhood. That's very intentional. But I don't think it was really until 2014 when Eric Gardner was killed that things started to get really real for me and conversations got really real on my street. So we have a half-court basketball, which makes us pretty cool to the kids that are in our neighborhood. And a lot of the time the boys in our neighborhood would just come home and they didn't have to ask, they could just go back out and play. I noticed after Eric had been killed that the boys were still on the court, but that they weren't playing. But they were actually just talking to each other, which was not their norm, and I was curious about it, so I walked out and just asked what was up. And as I was kind of overhearing what they were saying, one of the boys just said, I can't believe I have to live like this could be me for the rest of my life. And I foolishly went up and said, hey, what's up, boys? What are you talking about? With my chipper me attitude. And thankfully, they've known me long enough to where they started to share their stories. And listening to these bright, beautiful, brilliant, cheerful, and playful boys recognize, and these are 9, 10, and 11-year-old boys, recognize that they're going to have to live the rest of their lives afraid that people will assume they're violent and harm them. I understood the rage in a way that I hadn't before. I felt the rage because I could feel that the next door neighbors were terrified of their boys being killed. And I have a boy. I have a boy that's the same age. The difference between our boys is the skin color. So I was really emboldened at that moment, even though I already had before, to say that those boys have to have the exact same rights as my boy. My son has the privilege of seeing police officers as a person who's there to help him. He never has to question that. He never fears that they're going to assume that he's violent. I never have to have those type of conversations with him about where to put his hands or what to wear or how to speak. And that is what we need to listen and understand. It would be foolish for me to have an episode about listening where you're listening to my entire white voice the whole time. So what I want to ask you to do here is really take time to listen to the series that we've put together for you of stories. Some of you have suggested that we ask our campers to share their stories, and I want to tell you why we're not doing that. Same reason in the previous episode, I'd asked you not to go up to your people of friends, people of color, and say, tell me all of your bad stories about racism. That's why we're not doing this to our kids. I understand that that could be helpful in the learning. I promise that they are there, and that they are real, and that they can be shared individually with trusted individuals. So I hope you'll listen to the series of stories that we have collected for you and really listen and learn from those. And I think after you hear them, you'll understand what people mean when they say, if you're not outraged, you're not paying attention.